With that, then, we'd like to welcome Dr. Alan Ojik to speak to us. Dr. Alan Ojik, Corbiere.
Don't do as I do, do as I say. That's what my dad used to always say to me growing up. Dan bojo Anishinaabemowin dok nin sojik mbene do dem. Din wen magne dok, din wen dagne dok. Chinandam gi bijayam on pi minwa. I forgot my water. Patsy, you're awake. So far, give me time, eh? Okay. Chinandam dasha gi wiki jivna goa. We bijayam on pi minwa dash. Nui mi gwechuak. Nish nichkenk. I want to thank Bagamwe with the Mok and Sarah. I didn't see Sarah. Oh, she for inviting me to be here to come and share and talk. I didn't. Sorry, I didn't see you there. So I got the invite, and I thought, okay, I want to talk a bit about. I want to try and sell you something, and you'll see at the end what I'm trying to sell. And when you see it, I'm going to pass this book around, and if you want to buy, just kidding, it's not a buy. It's a free thing. If you want to, then put your email down. Then we're going to have a focus group, a Zoom focus group, and then when we do this, hopefully it'll make this tool that I'm talking about be even more user friendly. So chigabeing dash ko gi maji Anishinaabemowin kaimshe do nata Anishinaabemowin. So I started trying to speak Ojibwe like 32 years ago when my eldest was conceived. All right, yeah, okay. But my parents ansagi jgak dash nigitzi mak. And every day my parents spoke Ojibwe. So I heard it every day growing up. But then they talked to my siblings and then they didn't speak to us in Ojibwe. So that's how I grew up not speaking Ojibwe. And this is a real common story. Probably the majority of you have the same story in here. And so, but what I did when we conceived our child, I thought, well, all this stops with me. My parents spoke Ojibwe, my grandparents spoke Ojibwe, Binish dash Weshkat, right back to creation. They all spoke Anishinaabemowin. So one of the things that I wanted to come and talk about was this, where's that TV? Okay. I wanted to call this the state of Anishinaabemowin. I guess when I wrote it up at first, I thought I was going to be talking a bit differently. But this is, of course, people will argue with us, but this is where I found this map that I think represents Anishinaabe King, but also that this would be the places where we would find the highest concentration of speakers. So one of the things, though, I just have an old map, and I thought it was going to have a better, newer synthesis of 2021 census data. But actually, I didn't get around to it, and it's because we had to pay an extra amount to get into the deeper data. And so we were just able to access a surface level of data. Anyway, you see from that census there, that there's a difference in the amount of people that are speaking speaking an indigenous language. There were 485 people that reported speaking in 2016, but in 2021, there was 148,895 people. So that's a 97,125 difference. And if you just think of that in our context of revitalization, that's how many we lost in that 5-year period. How many actually learned in that 5-year period? It can't. not to be too pessimistic, but I don't think it's even 1,000. So we're really losing the race, is what I'm pointing out to here. So here, the other part is that we have, that was supposed to be the slide I just read. But as we all know, there's different language families throughout all Turtle Island. And some of them are totally unrelated, like the Haudenosaunee language is totally unrelated to Anishinaabe language or Algonquian language. And then similarly, the Sioux language, the Winnebago or Ho-Chunk they call themselves, that's totally unrelated to our language as well. But you see here, this is a dispersal of that information. And we have all the different dialects listed on there about Anishinaabemowin, what gets categorized as Anishinaabemowin. And it's Soto, it's Algonquin, it's Potawatomi, and so you got all these different names. And then in this, we have in there that there are 30,000 that reported speaking an Algonquian language in Canada. But so that, it was in 2016, it was 30,000, and then in this one, it was 21,775. And with that 21,775, of course, again, we lost, what's my math here, 8,225, something like that. So again, we don't have 8,000 learners, I don't think, to replace those. So one of the things is I think we got to get a bit more strategic in our sharing. We have all this going on, and there's a lot of things going on all over the Anishinaabe King, but we have a number of barriers that I think are self-imposed, and one of them is dialect affinity, where we say that's not our dialect, and so we won't go near it or touch it. But the interesting thing is, if we think of canoe making, this has just started being revisited in our community, but we don't have that terminology anymore. So if we went to an Algonquin people, different dialect, they'd have the words. So that's the power of using different dialects as well. They kept something that maybe we didn't have, and then we have something that maybe they don't have. So that's how we would be able to share and swap different concepts and words. So you might not be able to see this too well, but I had a student pull together just the aggregate data of all the different reserves on the North Shore. So this is from Shag to Whitefish River. And this is often thought of as the kind of the heartland of Anishinaabemowin at this point, where the highest concentration of speakers are. And then as you emanate out, sometimes that in this area, some of the speakers, some of the communities won't be speaking won't have as many speakers in their communities. So like you take Serpent River, for instance, they reported 15 speakers in their community. Compared to Sagamuk, you got 215. And then in Chiging, you got 180. But in Shishiguaning, you got 20. So some of these are, what we didn't get to do, like what I said with the data, is to look at actually compare that with the population size of that community. So you might have 20 people in the community at Shishiguaning. It's a small reserve. So out of 20 people, let's say maybe there's actually 180 people living on reserve. So that's a pretty good concentration still. But that's an aging community as well, the speakers. Those aren't new speakers. So here we go across. And then the part that we want to get at, this is the true test, is what they call intergenerational transmission, where you're speaking language in the home to your kids, and then the children are the ones reporting that they are speaking too. But what I find with these census is there's a lot of wishful self-reporting, that people end up saying, yeah, I speak language in my home, but they're just saying stuff like Bininan Zitagan or Gujamampi or whatever. So they're not really fully conversing. And that's the part that I think that we get these kind of false readings sometimes. Because there was one community on here, and I asked the person that I know from that community, it says they have this many speakers in your community. And they said to me, well, I don't know who they're talking to because I don't think there's that many speakers here. So there's this self-reporting. That's part of the problem with the census as well. And you get an elevated sense of what they actually have. So here, Gondak Nishnabe Kwai Kinomage Wakode Kinomage Gamagong Shkonaganing. These three ladies were speakers, all fluent speakers in my community. The one on your left, that's Malvina Corbiere. Ginjis Kunweo de Spanish residential school. She went to Spanish for a number of years. She came back to our community, married a guy from our community. She's actually from Wikwamkong. And then she became a teacher, eventually became the principal, and then eventually became the education director. But she just passed away within the last 5 years. And then the one in the middle is Nancy Debosque. She taught in our school for a number of years. And these two were fully fluent. This Anishinaabemowin was their first language. And then Nancy went off and went to Sioux, Michigan and taught at Sioux tribe for a number of years and then came back to the community. These two ended up helping me develop, not just me, but my team, develop a curriculum called Anishinaabemowin Revitalization Program in Chiging. But they both passed on now. And they made a contribution and with that curriculum. And the third is Iria Panamic. And I think she wasn't more than 10 years older than me, but she suddenly passed away unexpectedly. And so we're actually in Chiging, we're actually living this, because now we got no fluent teacher in our school. But when I was a kid in Chiging, we had non-native teachers, but we had native teachers. And all the native teachers in our school were fluent. But now all the native teachers in our school aren't fluent. So in my lifetime, I've seen that change. And many of you probably have seen the same thing. So we're living this where it's slipping away on us. So the one thing I say we got to do is we have to have a better mentoring program going. Because right here with this picture, we didn't plan well enough to have somebody in our school that's fluent, that teaches Anishinaabemowin. And so now in our community, they actually don't teach Anishinaabemowin. They say they teach Anishinaabemowin. So, and in that sense, you're teaching magazine making and dream catchers and that kind of thing. But you're not teaching language first and foremost. So that's what these three, we just didn't plan. And we took it for granted. And that's where I think a lot of us are. We take it for granted that there's 30,000 speakers. That's what the census tells us. There's 30,000 speakers. And it's all right. We're going to make it still. But now we're seeing that there's a decline. But in my own community, we don't have any teachers fully fluent anymore. And we changed the name from Ojibwe class to Anishinaabemowin class. Now it's Anishinaabemowin class. So now we're already letting it go. And that's what's happening here or there. So I didn't want to be a total downer, but it was real quiet there. But I wanted to say, is there a way to turn this thing here? Because I can't read. I used to have real good peripheral vision, but I kind of can't read that on the side there. Or I can move this thing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and then move this a bit more, and then move this chair, please. I just can't read my notes. So we got opportunities and we got challenges, and of course, probably all of you in this room been at these things where they call it a SWAT. Okay, me So the opportunities, of course, are that we got young adult learners leading the way, and I've been part of this, although I'm not that young anymore. But I went to this place called this group called Anishinaabemowin, and they're really working hard to learn the language, and that's an immersion program for adults. And this is the thing that we really have to do, is to get adult language learning program going. One of the things I saw Romaine Mitchell here and Amos Key, but one of the fellows that I haven't gotten to visit as much as I'd like to is Brian Miracle in Six Nations, but I've gone to visit him a number of times. And I heard him years ago in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee. They had a conference there. And he talked about how at Six Nations they use their local delivery mechanism program to actually fund adult learners from September to June to learn to speak the language. And it's an immersion program just for adults. So instead of taking upgrading or getting their GED or any other programming, they're actually being paid to learn their language. And what he ended up saying is that after a while, they actually have produced speakers there. And these speakers, he says, are better than him now, because he's always just teaching beginner Mohawk there. And now those students that went on and they're teaching at the Six Nations Immersion School, they're working with elders, so they've surpassed him in his speaking ability. That's the thing that we want in our communities, is to teach a cohort of young people that are really eager and have the aptitude and the commitment to do it, and to really learn and to dedicate that, and to just then go and learn it and then surpass the teacher, and then get into the schools to teach. That's the thing that what I see at Anishinaabemowin happening. And then of course there's Nanatagos Learning, and you'll hear from him too. I think he's on the agenda today or tomorrow. And then they're partly modeled by this group called Ojibwe Oma Gidakimanang. And this is a program out in Fond du Lac where they're teaching young adults in immersion, and they're leaving speaking Anishinaabemowin. I just don't understand, many of us don't understand why that program, they call it OOG, is having so much success over there. And then over here, we're not quite there yet. We're producing the amount of speakers that are young speakers there. They're doing something right over there. But the challenge, of course, is that the master speakers are passing on faster than the learners can acquire competency. And the opportunity right now is we have abundant digital and hard copy resources, but the challenge is we're inundated with beginner materials with no clear path to intermediate materials, let alone advanced materials. So if you go on Facebook or you go on YouTube and you click Ojibwe, chances are you're going to get a lot of stuff on colors, numbers, and then you're going to go to the next one, and it's going to be introductions to and where you're from, and that kind of thing. But you don't surpass that. You find it a hard thing to get past to the next stage. Well, what do I learn after I feel fine? That everything's Nishin. Everything's Nishin, now what? So what do you do then? That's the thing, is we don't have an actual clear path showing that. So here, the other part is there's dialectical differences that can enrich other dialects. And that's what I was saying with this thing with the canoe thing. Like people in Algonquin territory, they maintain their language a bit more in traditional activities than we have on Manitoulin Island. Like my father wasn't a hunter and isn't a hunter. He grew up a farmer and working in logging camps and cutting trees for a living. So he never learned all this traditional knowledge about trapping. Like people were asking me, how do you say that moose bell that hangs from the moose's jaw? And so people were saying Gadatagan, and that's just the English translation, the bell. but maybe that's what it is. But I saw that some said something like a modetan or something. It sounded like it was a bottle. But anyway, so we don't have that anymore. And I asked my dad, he didn't know that because he never hunted moose. So that's the thing is we got complementary knowledge systems and complementary languages, but if we pool these things together, we'll have a greater database and greater data to share and swap and actually teach our students more fulsomely. So, but right now the challenge is dialect affinity, and I've heard, and many of you have heard this. I imagine actually all of you in this room have heard this. That's not our dialect. And then in worst case scenarios, what I've actually heard is people have no speakers left in their community, and then a person from a different dialect comes into the community as a teacher and gets hired, and then the people say, that's not our dialect. We don't want to learn that. And it's like, it's your language, but it's not your dialect. You're still going to throw it away. So we really have to look at this dialect thing a bit more open-mindedly. There's cultural revitalization, and this is going on, and you see a lot of this land-based stuff going on, land-based teaching going on. And it's good, of course it's good, but what the majority of that seems to be done in English. That land-based language stuff is all done, the majority of it is done in English. And then if they incorporate Ojibwe or any indigenous language, it's the nouns. So you get the names of the fish that you set the net for, but you don't actually get talking about how the water, if the water is wavy, if the water is calm, if the water is deep, if the water is turbid, or anything like that. You just talk about you got a net full of Nemebenek goeta. You got a bunch of suckers. You didn't. So that's the difference with these land-based things is that there's an opportunity, but currently it's being done in English. And then, of course, our powwows you go to, these are opportunities as well. The other thing, the challenge, though, is that it's a steep learning curve to match language with cultural activities. If you really want to get in there at a community level and go learn some real deep learning and going into the bush, how many people actually have the time and privilege and the resources to do that, to take time off work, to go live in the bush for 1 or 2 months to learn from elders over there. So we don't make an investment in that particular case, but this is a disparity thing in the sense that we'll actually pay for somebody to go get training on whatever it is, working with computers, and we'll pay them to do whatever, let's say half a term, September to December, to go do a residency at a college or university to learn those skills. But we don't actually look at that as the same kind of skill set that is required in the community, where we'll pay somebody to go live in the bush with some elders to learn Ojibwe and then to bring that back to the community. We don't look at those as same skill sets. So the other thing that I find, and this is a challenge I think, is different communities require different responses. But what I find is that everyone thinks it's a cookie cutter approach, and that you just throw them anything and everything and just hope something sticks. And it actually doesn't work that way. So a community like Thessalon, First Nation, has different needs than a community like Perry Island. And then a community like Temagami has a different needs than a community like Barrier Lake. So there's different communities have different situations and different language. They have different number of speakers there, and they also have a different language opportunities, but sometimes they're not matching those, or maximizing those, I should say. So schools offer an opportunity for inter-community knowledge sharing. So one of the things that used to happen in our communities, and Nancy DeBosque was one of the people that would do this, and Marianne Toulouse in Skumuk, and I forget who the one was in Weequamcombe. But they used to have an actual public speaking contest, Chiging Lakeview School versus B. Dobbin, and in Wikwamkong and Shawanaswa School, sorry, in BI. So the kids would go from different grades and they'd have a contest speaking Anishinaabemowin and they'd actually win prizes. We don't do that anymore. And that's the thing that we have to start doing again to give kind of some kind of prestige for language capability and language mastery. But we don't do that. And the thing that this does get done at Anishinaabemowin once a year, but this actually has to be improved upon, and it has to occur with more frequency. Are these actual kind of skills? So this is one of my this meme made me laugh, and I think it, as all funny memes, they contain a bit of truth. And it's he says, "I speak my traditional language so my ancestors can understand me. I hear them answer me in the wind. We get it, you can count, maybe learn more than numbers and animals and bad words." So let's see if this works. I hope it does.
Minashna Maki singa the Bajama. Oh, Bajama Baginebik, Min one Maki, Mim the Gavan and Joshko Makison. Menashko, Yama Bagineb was Nena Maki, one years wash canoe Maki. I'll pitch the Mabaduction and Ginebush. I gave us a double over. Ni dog madmen den inte vidik ni. Kanske skulle gå om Maki. Ja, jag ska gå med den ene, gå med det. Det men jag använder Maki sanna. Och bena. Genevik. Visst jag det går så om den ni, nimki bak ni betaketek. Och när Makis, visst jag det ni, i rås på det jättet, i min råsnet och den.
So that, I don't know how to pause it, but the main point there that I want to get to is, how do we get from word of the day back to this? We're doing these words of the day. You go on to YouTube, Facebook, and you get word of the day. How many of you remember last week's word of the day on Tuesday or Monday? And so here, what we're trying to do with these is also to get the full story of what the elders are saying, the stories that they heard, and bring those into the school. But that actually isn't really happening. It's happening in English, but it's not happening in Anishinaabemowin either. So these kind of videos, I don't know how much of these videos are actually being used in the schools. And at this particular point, this story, the word that I like that she says in there, she says that the frog jumped right in the middle there, and nanawing dashgi kwashkenewa makakis, shawshko makis. And then she says, nanawa kop. I never heard that word before, but I understood what she meant. And that's right in the middle of that poison ivy. So what she's talking about is the actual relationship between the snake and the frog and that poison ivy. And she said that frog jumps in the middle of that poison ivy and that snake won't get him. That's so there's what we call what my friend there calls traditional environmental knowledge that's happening there. But we don't actually look at it that way. We don't teach it that way. So this is the kind of stuff that we got to bring into the school, but we don't. For some reason, we're still not bringing this into the school. I got this diagram from Kim Anderson's book called The Recognition of Being, a Study of Native Women. And in this diagram, she talks about how this was the traditional social structure of our communities, of our families, that the children were the middle of that. They were the core. They were everything. And then surrounding those children were the elders. And so why I showed that video beforehand is that that elder in the past would have been the one telling those stories to the children. And when they would have been out going on the land picking berries, bobbing with oak, if they're going picking whatever, blueberries or strawberries, then this story would have come up. But now that they took the children out, especially at residential school time, but even today still, this is still the position we're in, the children are removed from that relationship with the elders. The grandparents are no longer the primary teachers of the children, and the school is the primary educator of the children in most cases. So that's the part that the crux of this issue, where we keep saying, oh, just speak to the kids, they'll pick it up. It really could be that easy. But of course it isn't. We don't actually, our grandparents don't actually, the majority of our grandparents don't raise us nor educate us. They send us off to school. If we do live with them, they send us off to school, and then we go to them before after school program, and then maybe get sent back to the house. But they're not doing this in Anishinaabemowin, and they're not doing traditional activities. And then the women take care of the elders and the children and provide for them, and then the men are on the outer circle to protect them. I'm always inspired by this Tom Porter's phrase. I heard him speak a number of years ago, a couple of times I saw him, but this time he talked about establishing his community there, and he said he wanted it the reverse of Carlisle Indian School. That's how he says it. But he says, learn everything that they tried to take away from us. And so that's what this story is to me, what that one little story, why I picked that one to tell. These are the kind of things that they tried to take away from us, and that they devalued and diminished and put down. Anyway, but do we have a specifically funded, supported, and designed programs for young families? Just speak to them doesn't work. That's what a lot of elders will say this to young adults, just speak to them. And like this is supposed to happen. And it actually, we're 30 years into, well, maybe longer than that, since 1974, Indian control of Indian education. When we took over and started teaching Anishinaabemowin in our classes, we're still not achieving the successful results that we anticipated regarding our language. So that's the thing is, we actually have to deliberately design something for young families. But here, this diagram here needs to be expanded, because where do clans fit in this? Where do nations fit in this? And then the other part, where are there opportunities for inter-community collaboration? And then this again comes back to this dialect thing. So here, this is another diagram, and this was shared by to an elder, I think, to Sylvia Miracle, I believe, and then to Kim Anderson, and they wrote it in that Aboriginal Healing and Wellness Strategy report. And it's a good teaching. I've heard Sylvia deliver this teaching back about 15 years ago. And it's about this life cycle, and it starts, of course, with the infants and toddlers, and she says at each stage of these lives, you have a primary responsibility. So an infant, it's joy. A toddler is safety. A child, it's truth. A youth is to speak out. And then a young adult is to work for the people. And then the parents are to provide. And then the grandparents are life teachers. And then the elders are spirit teachers. But the cool part about this thing is, sure, you can go around in the circle, and we have circles ad nauseum in our communities, a circle for everything. But in this particular one, I call this one like the Trivial Pursuit one, is because you look at that elder spirit teacher, and then right across that circle, they're supposed to work with the youth. So each of these spokes, if you think of these as spokes, that's who actually are supposed to work with the. So then the parents are supposed to work with the toddlers. The infants work with the young children. Of course, this is like that movie Babysitter's Club. So that's the idea there too. And the child is the truth, and they work with the grandparents. So when children will just blurt out things, that's the truth. They don't have a filter yet, and they'll just blurt out things that They'll say, well, why is this? Why is that? And so they're the ones that are to do that. But the youth are the ones that are challenging the status quo. I don't want to do that. Why do I have to do this? And then the elder, the spirit teacher, is supposed to guide them through that period. But we don't have a language program that actually matches these two groups together in this wheel. And we don't have let alone an actual program that tailors materials to each stage of life. So this is, I'm talking primarily Union of Ontario Indian catchment area. And of course, a lot of people, some communities pulled out. So some of the data gets skewed. And that's one of the things that we got to look past here, is we'll pull these data together and it says, well, this is just AES communities, or this is AI communities, or this is independent communities. And it's so we get this fractured data. And we don't actually then talk about the whole region. And then we have to try and put a whole region of information together to see what's happening in order to make a deliberate and thoughtful response to our situation. So here, thank Ali Darney for sending me this information, that Anishinaabe Nation has 39 First Nation communities, but in there's 34 affiliated district school boards. So I asked her, how many school boards are in this territory? And then how many are actually teaching Anishinaabemowin of those district school boards? And then within those district school boards, how many teachers are there? And then so she said that she told me that there's 110 language teachers that participated in learning circles provided by, delivered by AES. So there's 110 language teachers in this area. How many of them are actually fully, completely, totally fluent? Maybe I'm being too overly pessimistic and saying 20. I don't know, but I don't know. That's the thing, we don't have the information. But the majority of teachers that I know that are in district school boards, not on reserve, that are on district school boards, the majority of them are not fluent. I know that, the ones I know, they're not fluent. And this is, instead of pointing the fingers at them and chastising them, instead of chastising, we got to support them. We got to support them. We got to try and teach them. We got to have them up their game, give them opportunity to up their game. So that's the challenge. This is an old report, and so ideally we take total control of our education, but the reality is that our children spend the major amount of time in schools, especially in the early years. We have to develop more realistic expectations of the school and support the staff. What I find happens, this happened in Chiging, the parents, most of the parents ended up, well, the school is supposed to teach Ojibwe and relieve the parents of any responsibility anymore. So there, we have to actually support that staff there. Here, this particular diagram is from 1995, but I think it's just still relevant, because the two bottom lines says the amount of native cultural inclusion and the amount of native language. You see that line goes across and that increases. And then as that increases, you see you're getting actually more and more language learning, but also more a situation of where you are, what people, and a lot of people talk about Anishinaabe and Endangered, thinking in the language. So a lot of times where I think we are right now, we're stuck. I say we're stuck at the second level there. So when I was a kid, we had language program, but we didn't have much in the way of our perspective in that. And this is when we're learning numbers, colors, pigs, monkeys, elephants, giraffes, chickens. We're learning all these domestic animals. And when I was a kid, I didn't know what a fisher was. And then when I first fasted, then that's when I first saw a fisher, and that's what my name means, Ojik, and I'd never seen that, and I never heard of it, and only till I actually sought it, and that's the thing. The school now is the place where our people are to not only the children don't seek it, they go there, but our teachers are supposed to be the ones to provide this now to them. So now we hear a lot about Wabjesh and the different dodems and that, but we're still stuck at the content. So this means then you celebrate different special days in the language. So our curriculum is still centered around this, especially in the provincial system, but even on reserve. So September is back to school. October is Thanksgiving and Tasewang and Halloween. And then November is Remembrance Day. And then December is Christmas. And then Nimkodading. And then Valentine's Day. And then March break. And then maybe April or Easter. So that's what our school year is about. And then that's what usually our curricular special days is about. And then we don't really talk about some of us are including Anishinaabemowin stuff in there, but the majority of it is still geared to dominant society. And it's understandably why that's so. But the next level is then you add in this ecological context. So when I was a kid, our language teacher taught us this song, Hey Ani Ani, Hey Ani Ani Keen, Hey Ani Ani, Hey Ani Ani Keen. And then they'd ask where you're from or where you're going. And then you'd say, and I don't even know if my kids know this anymore, but we would say, Pashtunong and Dija me, we would say in that song, I'm going to Corbiere to court. That's where that's where the court is on the Manitoulin Island. But and then we'd say we Kwem Kong and Ojibwe. We wouldn't just say the reserves, we'd say all the non-native towns that we have names for in our language. And so we learned that as a kid, but we were just learning a song. But now, I don't think the kids know those names for non-native. Maybe they know Webjong still, Webjong. But I don't know if they know Pash Denong. Anyway, that's the ecological context where you start to think of your land in Anishinaabe terms. You don't think of it that way. But then the social process, this is the part where we're really lacking. We're talking about clans, but we actually don't know we all just say nitais for cousin. We actually don't say we have two sets of words for aunts and uncles and cousins. And it depends if your cousins are your father's brother's kids, meaning they're the same clan, or your mother's sister's kids, meaning they're the same blood. So those ones you actually refer to, those words for those cousins are actually brother and sister, how you would refer to your brother and sister. But when you actually look at how we say it now, we just say nitais, and that's just a generic word, but it actually isn't the right word in most contexts. And then that's the other part, is we end up we'll say njishin for uncle, but there's also nimishome. And nimishome is my father's brother, and it literally means little grandfather. And jishin is my mother's brother. So those are the words we're losing, and that this is the social process that we aren't teaching and that we're not abiding by. And then you get into this cognitive process. And this is just how when speakers think, they organize the world differently. And when they blurt out a sentence, it comes to them naturally because they think of it from a different space than we do. So when I talk to my dad, I ask him different things, and sometimes I'm struggling for a word, and then I don't come up with the word right away because I'm not fluent. But then what I would say in 2 or 3 words, he'd say in 1. And that's because they think of things in an action-oriented sense. So one time I was strapping on my daughter's e-bike on the back of my truck. And then I was saying, oh, it's stuck. I can't, I'm trying to get the strap off. So I was saying to my dad in Ojibwe, I said, gedisk. And I couldn't, I was trying to think of the next word to say to get that strap off. And then I was saying, pikkan. And then he says, bigadal biganan. Bigadal biganan. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's the word I'm thinking of. So begid means that you let it go, and then al big is a string-like thing, and then gidal biganan. And I was like, that's the word I was trying to. I couldn't do it though. So that's the cognitive process, and this is the thing that we're not teaching at all because we teach nouns. It's sometimes it's coloring time in Anishinaabemowin class. And if we're lucky, they'll say, tiso mos, gi tiswa mos, mizin bio adik, gi mizin bio adik. If we're lucky, they say that. But most times it just says, they'll say, and you see this now, people are getting these names. You see Anishinaabe names where if the being is animate, you would say misko or just ozao in front of the name. But now they'll put ozawa makwa when it used to be just ozao mkwa or ozao nimki or ozao agush. But now they'll say ozawa wagush. But that ozawa is actually used in an inanimate. And so some would say miskwa wagush instead of misko wagush. And it's misko because it's miskoze, and miskwa because it's inanimate and animate. But these things I'm getting into the weeds there. So why use texts and elder recordings? We get to tell our own stories from our own perspective and in our own language. Texts tell stories that many can learn without meeting the storyteller or the elder. So the example here, of course, is how many people use that Mishomis book in their classrooms, and it's written in English. I wish that Eddie would have had this done in Ojibwe eventually, and then we could have been further ahead. He did record one of the migration story, a version of the migration story in the Ojibwe Native Journal, and that's online. So Anton Troyer recorded him with that. So you can get that part anyway. And then Basil Johnson's The Manitous, and then also Ojibwe Heritage. So these are books that are in English that are being used, and the stories are being used, but they're in English. So we need to have these ones that we use all over the territory, but in Anishinaabemowin. And then you can just tweak that dialect part. That's the thing that people don't really seem to latch onto. And they just throw the whole thing out. The goal would be to use books and videos in Anishinaabemowin across specific related regions, such as the North Shore of Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Manitoulin Island, the North Shore of Lake Ontario, and the Georgian Bay Area. Learners can then practice patterns, expand vocabulary while learning cultural teachings and historical events in Anishinaabemowin. Using local elder recordings in curriculum instills pride and a sense of continuity and ownership. So when the other thing is you have this distance thing. Well, that when I grew up, I don't know why I thought this. I thought Rama was where real Indians lived. It just sounded Rama, and that's not even an Anishinaabe word, but, and I thought us in Chiging, we're not real traditional Indians. Although we all spoke Anishinaabe at that time when I was a kid. I just thought that's where real Indians are, at Rama. And the other thing was real Indians are elsewhere, not where we're from. But if we record our elders telling stories in Anishinaabe, and then kids have to listen to those in the school, then they start to say, hey, this is us. This is us too. Whereas when that absence is there, something else fills its place. That's the main other thing that I want you to think about. In that absence, something else fills its place. And when we have this absence of Anishinaabe, English takes its place. So This is one of my old favorite books I bought when my daughter was young. Well, my eldest was still in the womb, and I ended up reading to her. And this is, of course, Polly here. Polly's the illustrator. And her mom wrote the story. But the part I want to point out to you is that that second page, it says ages 4 to 6, I think. 4 to 8, sorry. I can't, I should have got my... So it's beautifully illustrated and the story is great. And I can't read it from here, but I trust me, I can read it. I've read this many times. But this isn't 4 to 6. And it ain't that Lenore and Polly said this is for children 4 to 6. It's Sister Vision or whoever did this back in the 90s. So the other point I want to make, there's another book that I love that we don't use, and it's called Eshkin Tam Maunjiding, and it's by Merle Sans Biriba. And it's about the first time they had their Otter clan gathering on Beausoleil, and it's written in Anishinaabemowin. So these are stories, local stories that actually have to be told and shared in our language and used. But here what the part is, when you say it's geared to 4 and 6 years old, I could read that to my child and stuff, but the level of language is really high. So here, of course, we have, he's no Ojibwe. Isidore left the room. But we have Isidore and Shirley Williams. Oh, Shirley Williams did the previous translation for that other book. These are, I just picked 5 books, random books, but these are books I picked because I think that any and every class in Anishinaabe King should use these 5 books. But I'm not saying which grade yet because the language level is too high in some of these. So here, this Bojo Hello was done by a fellow named Paywis Tekli, I think, and then Nebe Bem Sawadang, Water Walker. So that's about Josephine Mandamin, so it's current, and it is about a political issue, so that should be covered in our class. And then Memingwa Quens, this is about residential school, so it should be covered in class. And then Bogone Gijik, this is by Leonard and Mary Moose, and this is about the hole in the sky, that's what it's literally called, but it's the constellation Pleiades, and how the people came through that hole in the sky down to Earth. So it's a creation story. So this should actually be in our curriculum as well, all across the territory. And then this is Bazin Ba. Basil Johnson Ba was hired by Zgomuk to write these stories, and there's a number of different stories in there that were supposed to be for the immersion program. Here's the first book, and this one is geared to a lower grade. So here, this is the Bojo Maingan. Maingan Nwab Ma, Bojo Maingan, Waignesh Rwandaman. So here, this is just doing simple patterns and going back and forth, and then throughout the book, they meet different animals and they say the same things. It's kind of built on that, like, what was that? I don't know, brown bear, yeah. I read that thing so many damn times you think I'd but I blocked it out, I guess. Here's Memingwa Kwe. Gine the big kamina got eshkami dash gi much tat we negi wet. Pamago je ga bezagje ninji ta got enje jiga kwaning. So that's supposed to be a kid's book. For us, it's good. Like, well, I don't know how many of us I'm including in there, but like I understand that, and Harvey and Dolores understand that. But so then here you go to the next one. And then Bogone Gijik, the book is all in English, and Leonard Moose did all the illustrations himself. And then at the back of the book, he hand wrote the story in Ojibwe. So that's why you can hardly see that bottom left slide. But he says, Mi ingyu gajadge gajik Bogone yaka gijigong. So it's a different dialect, but it isn't something that's insurmountable that people can't understand. Over there they say ingyu, and over in our area we say ge. So instead we wouldn't say mi ingyu gija de ge gajik, we'd say mi ge Gijadagegijik, Bugoneyak, Gijigong, and those are the same thing. But you just make those adjustments yourself. Here, this is Nebe Mes Saudang. So the other thing I want to point out is these three books, Wagosh, Nebe Bem Saudang, and Memingwa Kwe, very attractively illustrated for children. This is very alluring to children. But again, the language level, Ngoring Gijgak Nanda Ni Wen Zit Taugan Nebe, Dane Anje, Andadazima Gadon. So these are some of the texts that those 110 teachers in different affiliated school boards have access to. I don't know how many of those 110 teachers can read those and use those in the classroom. And this is our challenge here, is to actually make tools for them to be able to handle those and then to use them and to teach them to all those kids. Because I think each and every one of these stories belong in the school at some grade. So here's Bauzine's stuff. And of course, a bunch of Bauzine's material has been deposited at the McMaster University in Hamilton. And all those materials that he's written, he's still, I made my will, my wife and I made our will. And then when we saw the lawyer, we tried to put something in the will, and then she says, "Oh, you're trying to rule from the grave." And that's what Basil put in this repository, that nobody can change how he wrote the story. That's ruling from the grave. So basically, people don't know how, a lot of people can read this, but others can't read it. But the stories are important, and we need those stories. But this one's about the first flower. So we have to actually translate these, and Basil probably going to be rolling in his grave when we change these to double vowel orthography. But I've already done that with these things. So I loved him and all the stuff that he's done. So what I did, I was like, well, we got to come up with a system of how to actually sort these out. And so this is what I use. My analogy is, of course, now we're tapping everything. That's not a double pun or double entendre. But we tap when we pay. But when we used to actually sort our change, we'd buy these things. And you just dump that, and it would sort it out for you. It put pennies here. Of course, we don't have pennies anymore. And it would put nickels and dimes and quarters and loonies and toonies, and it would sort it for you. I had that older fashioned one where you shake it and then it all comes down. Then you can tube them. So that's what we needed and this is what my friend, I met a guy a while ago. He's a linguist and a software programmer, and so he's doing what is called an analysis, Anishinaabemowin analyzer, and this is that's the actual. So later on, I'm going to pass this around, and you listen. If you want to actually be part of a focus group on testing out this machine, this analyzer, put your email down. You don't have to, but put your email down. Then we'll send out an email and see if you want to actually get training on this thing. So we use 2 dictionaries here, and I'm just surprised at how many people on Facebook don't use dictionaries. You go to word of the day, or you go to phrase of the day, and everyone's asking, how do you say car? Or how do you say morning or sunrise? And it's like there's 2 dictionaries, there's 3, but these are the 2 most comprehensible. There's another one called Freelang, but they don't use them. They won't use them for whatever reason. They won't use a dictionary. But here, these are powerful tools that we have. But both of these dictionaries, the one on the left is the Ojibwe People's Dictionary of Minnesota, and then the other one is Anishinaabemowin Online Dictionary. And actually you see on the Anishinaabemowin Online Dictionary, I just put the ZHIBB. That's all I put, ZHIBB. And then all the words that begin with that show up. And this is what they call morphology, and this is what makes our language so descriptive. This is where where I would have found when I was asking my dad, how do I say, release that strap on that bike, I would have put begid, and then that's when this word would have popped up, B-G-I-D, and then that's what this would have popped up. Anyway, then you look at the other one, I entered in the English one, I put run, and then here all these different words come up for run. And so of course our language is different than English, but you'll notice that these words actually are complete sentences. Bebamba dewok, they are running together. That's a complete thought. It's not just run like a command. But both also offer verb inflections, and this is just conjugating the verbs. This is what students need and use. Because when I started learning a language, and at one point I always tell people, I knew about 1,000 words, but I didn't know how to put them together. And probably there's people in here, sitting here, that know 1,000 words, and they don't know how to put them together. And that's what you got to be taught, and that's what some of these courses teach you. Anyway, these are both powerful and informative tools for Anishinaabemowin learners and students. So the thing is, we actually have to start thinking more about making the materials for the students and the learners. Because like I showed those 3 old ladies at the beginning, we don't have an actual good succession plan. We're actually not doing good mentoring. And in 20, 30 years, we're going to be stuck. Because if we look at the average lifespan of Indigenous men and Indigenous women, that's when we take the youngest speaker that we know, and that's how many years you got. So we're not doing a good job of that. But here, this is a thing called text readability. And some of you teachers may already know this as the Flesch-Kincaid scores. So Dustin Bowers, my colleague who's doing the programming and stuff, he actually looked at this. And then it's for English though, and he said that you could actually assign a score, a complexity score, to readability and grade level. So you usually they measure the average length of sentences and the average length of words. So if the word is this long, can a grade 3 person say that and read that? Maybe, maybe not. I actually had a grade 3 student that just blew us away with what they were able to do when we had that Anishinaabemowin revitalization program going. And then this provides a quick idea of what stories are most accessible to a beginner. So we put this story, that URL I gave you there. If you take a monolingual Ojibwe text and you put it in that, you just cut and paste it in there, then it's going to print out this analysis that I show you. The only drawback of this Flesch-Kincaid score is that it was designed for people that speak English when they're learning to read English. So they're not learning English, they actually already know English. So here, this is the kind of one of the drawbacks, is because we know English, but we're using this to learn Anishinaabemowin. So that's the thing we have to factor into this. But what this analyzer did, it took those 6 stories that we put in there, and it cranked out the most frequently used words. So oftentimes people, what they end up doing, one of the most frequently used words in Ojibwe is me, M-I-I. But we actually don't teach that. I've seen a lot of different teachers. They don't teach what that word does. And it actually plays a big role. So this shows actually which verbs, to a teacher, this would show you which words you should actually focus on in your class and how you and construct your lesson plan. Here again, so when we look at dictionaries, in English, we look up the word run. And then we already know, because we're English speakers here, that there's running, runs, ran. And we have no problem with all that. But in Ojibwe, for whatever reason, we get all bent out of shape when the word gets conjugated to indicate different actors and different tenses. So here, what I pulled together here was when we went through those different stories, these were the words that came out, but these are how those words were conjugated. So when you say, oh, the word is bemadze, but you see how many different ways it was used in those 6 stories. And then the students have to learn all that, or the teachers. Some of the teachers in these district school boards don't know that. Just that one column. They probably don't know all of that one column. They may know the word, 100% they know the word Bamadzawin and Mino Bamadzawin. But do they know Eko Madzian? Maybe. Do they know Wijib Madzit? Eb Madziek? I don't know. The Bemadzawapa? Do they know what that means? I don't know. So here, this is the same thing, Kita. They've likely heard the word to say something, I should say. Kendan, Windamoa. Do they know all these? Windamagasi. Gi Windamagasi. Do the teachers or students know that? These are all the words that came from those 5 stories. And Windamagon, Windamagasi, Windamoan, Windamagon. So there's all different ways that this is one word, but we're changing that word in different ways to convey different information. And that's the part where we're failing. So we assigned, Dustin assigned a complexity score to each of these books. So the most complex book was Water Walker, followed by Butterfly Girl, and then followed by Bogone Gijik, and then Waoskone, and then Nangok, and then the lowest score was Bojo. But that Bojo book was deliberately made for low readers, so that's why it's got this low complexity score. And then that Memingwakwe, that was an English story written, and then Isidore and I believe Shirley translated it into Anishinaabemowin. So it wasn't designed to do what Bojo was doing. So that's what I'm arguing here, is that we actually have to make these things more tiered and scaled and scaffolded to specific grades and specific capabilities. Here, this just takes different sample sentences here. And again, it isn't Polly and Lenore, it was Sister Vision that said that that book was 4 to 8 or 4 to 6 year olds. But this is the kind of vocabulary that 4 to 6 year old ain't gonna handle if it's geared to them. So that's the thing is what I'm saying is we got to come up with a more realistic categorization system for the resources that we make. And our funding situation basically dictates that we do these one and done things. So I don't know how many times Isidore has gotten a contract to do one thing and then move on to the next thing and then move on to the next thing. So we don't have actual, okay, Isidore might say, okay, this last time I did this, something like this, we didn't gear it to an intermediate speaker, or we didn't gear it to a beginner. This time, let's do that. So that's the kind of thinking that we got to start to do. And these scores, when you use that analyzer, it'll pump out these scores to show you how complex something is. And then here, some of you guys maybe are linguists, but you may not use this stuff. And I know many speakers will detest this and hate this, and it's all right. I'm all right. You can hate it. Be a hater then. But the thing is, this is helpful for some of our people that are working through this and learning this. And it isn't for everybody. I'm just showing you what this thing can do. And then this is how complex, these are still sentences from those 5 books that are geared to kids. And so you see how complex, there's a score of 35. That's how complex but we got to test this out and make, this is just our first run making a scale of this. So imagine if we shared all of our language resources together in a common searchable repository. Right from Quebec all the way out to the plains in Saskatchewan. Everyone had all of their resources digitized and in a repository, and you just said, I want to make a lesson on canoe making, I want to make a lesson on snowshoe making, or I want to make a lesson on smoking tan hides. You see all this going on in land-based education now. But, you know, you go to one place, it may not have that information. But when you ask across all this Anishinaabe king, somebody's going to know. And would be the power of that. Imagine then if that repository had instructions on making crafts in Anishinaabemowin, not just English. If then your actual lesson then had, and the examples I use is there's a National Film Board did a thing on Caesar's G-Man, Caesar's canoe. And this old man goes out in the bush and he cuts the birch bark and then he picks the spruce root and then he makes that bigueux and then his kids running around and then by the end of the show he's got that made a birch bark canoe. And then there's another one called Earl's G-Man, and this is in Minnesota. And Earl Nyholm goes out and he makes a birch bark canoe, but he just moshkin Anishinaabemo wa Earl. He just speaks Anishinaabe in that actual video. So we got a lot of resources that are out there, we're just not maximizing them. So that's the thing, if we had this, imagine if we had a Anishinaabemowin repository of the Bajamowin and Ansokan and Atsokanak. So imagine if we had all these different stories. Now people, this will be hotly debated, but one of the things is that we got the Mishomis book for the migration story, but there's actually other migration stories, and there's other stops that people talk about that we actually don't actually have in there.
I was just going to say, there should also be a recording of the story to go along with the book.
Yeah.
People need to hear it.
Yeah.
Need to hear it on tape.
Yeah.
How to say those words in a sentence and whatever, and really speed them up by listening to it themselves first before they try to say it.
Yeah.
Understand?
That's the good thing about that Ojibwe People's Dictionary. They got sound bites by many of the words. I don't think they have it for all the words.
But I mean, if you're writing a storybook, it should
No, and the video I showed, that's what we're doing. And it had the subtitles. And then if you go to that website, each of those videos have it written out, and then they have the English translation, and most of them will have a glossary. Let me just finish this because they're gonna give me the, and then you can ask questions.
Ojibwe has that.
What's
Both languages and the auditory.
which one?
Waking up Ojibwe.
Yeah,
Anishinaabe Moda.
yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff out there. Yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. There's lots of stuff already out there, but it's not all in one place. Yeah, you got to search and find. Yeah. So imagine if the different dialects contributed their vocabulary and this was seen as a positive instead of a negative. Imagine if children moved from a school in Thunder Bay to a school in Sault Ste. Marie or the Parry Sound and learned from the same resources at the same level. Imagine if we invested in young adults with the aptitude to learn our language before they became parents. And this is what they say, mik sachage. You arrange marriages, that somebody's fluent, a young man's fluent, a young lady's fluent. Okay, you two marry and have kids. And this is language strategy. Imagine if we consistently invested in our non-fluent teachers so that they became conversationally competent. This is the part that we're failing, and this is the part where the majority of our students are going. The majority of our young people and students are going to schools, and they're with people that aren't fluent. And instead of chastising them or castising them, we actually should be supporting them and teaching them as much as we can. So that book's going around, and if you want to participate in this, here's the URL. or if you just want to take the URL and test it out, it's a bit unuser friendly right now because we're just in the testing part of it, eh? But this, if you write your name on that book, I need that book back too. That's got my lesson plans. Miigwachki bizindo yak minwa dasha miigwachandam we could you nego we bid the batama Ojibwe bak Anishinaabe King Anishinaabemoin je. Miigwach for inviting me and thank you for listening.